Encomium is defined as a formal expression of praise for a person, often delivered with warmth and enthusiasm. My encomium for Viola begins today with a quote from the poet Walt Whitman, who wrote the line, "I contain multitudes." I think all of us in this room would agree, Viola was complex. She contained multitudes that were vast and deep. Viola was strong and independent, as most people know. She was also tender and compassionate, as most of you have felt. She was bold and tough, but loving and nurturing. She was a combination of a tough warrior fighting inequality and injustice, who also planted roses and lavender in her garden. She possessed a mind that understood quantum physics and a heart that was open to everyone. She could appear to be the most unique person in a room of people, but left everybody feeling like she was their personal friend before they left. And I see heads nodding. Viola once wrote, and I quote, "I seem to specialize in ridiculous ideas. I think I've always been this way. It doesn't matter to me if I have never done it, or if it's never been done by anyone. I have an idea and I want to do it." The word ridiculous is defined as foolish, unreasonable, absurd, or preposterous. But those words never slowed Viola from following her dreams and desires. Viola's younger years were spent both on a military base near Tokyo in Japan and in a family home in Ashland, Oregon. In Ashland, her grandfather, known as Big Will, rode a giant white horse and had his own reserved bar seat in the local bar. He introduced his spunky young granddaughter to the founder of the Ashland Shakespeare Festival. Living near the theater and spending time backstage as a young child, she fell in love with another Will, William Shakespeare. At a young age, Vee told her mother, "When I grow up, I want to be a poet." Her mother literally cried at this preposterous idea. But Vee wanted to do it, and we all know the outcome of that. During years in Japan, Vee learned the meaning of compassion from her father, Glenn Smith. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Tokyo was impoverished and trying to recover from the firebombings of World War II. Glenn grew up poor himself in a small town in Ohio. A prized Christmas present, he talked about being a single orange, which he would peel and eat one slice a day. In Tokyo, it was not unusual to see people going through his garbage can looking for food. He would always rush out the front door and offer them a job. "Do you know how to cook?" "No." "Could you wash my car?" "Well, okay." And he'd find something for everybody to do. Viola benefited from this group of Japanese helpers around the house who taught her many skills: language, a Japanese dance instructor, calligraphy, flower arranging. It became part of who she was. Ideas in life are usually only considered ridiculous or preposterous until they become a reality. Viola's reality came from somewhat preposterous situations, including meeting many famous people in different situations. She interviewed 3 U.S. presidents. She also interviewed 3 governors of California, including Ronald Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Jerry Brown. She discussed the author Victor Hugo with the Supreme Court Justice on a flight to Washington, D.C. On another flight, she asked the U.S. Secretary of Defense, "Could I see your tiger tattoo on your stomach?" He did pull it up and let her see it. She interviewed Dolly Parton on KZAP many years ago, and later in the dressing room, she asked Dolly, and Dolly took off her wig in front of her to show her real hair, which wasn't really blonde. Don't tell her I said that. Viola traded stories with famous poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti. She once conducted a job interview with Maya Angelou while sitting next to Maya at her swimming pool. Mother Teresa once visited a hospital room where Vi was visiting her close friend, Father Larry, who was dying of AIDS, and she got to watch Mother Teresa wash his feet. There were other absurd situations in Viola's life, such as being accidentally radiated when she was working on a nuclear power story up at the Hanford nuclear site in Washington. Afterwards, they had to dispose of her clothes, and she had to wait while they went to town and bought her some new clothes to wear to leave the nuclear power site. During an investigative trip to Kazakhstan, she had the honor of sleeping with the mayor and his large family of 20 other people in the same yurt. Viola once shook the hand of a drunk Boris Yeltsin on the night he became president in Russia. Along with her news partner, Jock Church, Viola helped release thousands of helium balloons from the Rancho Seco nuclear power plant to help Sacramentans realize the risks of nuclear radiation perhaps drifting over Sacramento when those balloons landed in their yards. I see some nods there from some people. Stories about Viola could go on all day and into the night.
Please do.
But we have to be out here by 5 anyway. But what made Viola most famous to most of us and many of the public was her writing, which was a constant in her life. She always carried a notebook with her, and anytime a thought popped in her head, the notebook popped out of her purse. V's poetry had the ability to convey deep emotions and simple truths. She read her poetry with energy, always in capturing the audience's attention in her readings. Her poems are bold, direct, yet tender and sweet. For me, they painted clear visual images and stirred deep feelings. Her words were precise and delicious. And I love the titles she gave many of her poems. Let me share a couple of titles with you. A Family of Women in Love's Kitchen. A Memory Recovered While Deviling Eggs in the Delta. I Have Lived in the Veins of Men. Down at the Mexican Cemetery. In the Marketplace of the Sensitive. 19 zippers and a ducktail. Bonfire and a blizzard. The Some Complexities of the Humble Field. The Seductive Scent of Paris. Cool Enormity. A Redhead Rides Side Saddle. Dear Pablo Neruda, number 469. And yes, there were 48 other poems written as letters to Pablo Neruda. He was her muse. Viola and I got to know each other in a rather unusual manner. Prior to meeting Viola, I had lost my previous wife to a sudden heart attack, and about 6 months later, I decided I wanted to try writing a screenplay that had been in my head for many, many years. My friend Donna Fuller said, well, I know someone who's a writer, and she does a lot of freelance work. I got Viola's number, called her up, and hired her to meet with me to write a screenplay. And once a week, we met at a coffee shop to discuss my ideas and spun off into other writing discussions. I remember at one of the meetings, she said to me, I'm done with men. After several regrettable experiences prior to that, I'll never be with another. I told her, I may be done with women. I was loved so deeply by my wife that passed away. I can't imagine anybody loving me that much ever again. Luckily, we were both wrong. Viola shared with me that she had 10 recipes, and one of them was coffee, but she came with 10,000 poems. Over a year or two, we fell in love, moved from deep friendship to romantic relationship. When I asked Viola to marry me, she had a ridiculous response. She said, on one condition. I scratched my head, looked at the diamond ring in my hand, and said, what would that be? She said, I want to get married in Giverny, France, in Monet's gardens. I said, well, why not? Let's do it. And we did. It sounded preposterous, but it became a reality. As I now look back, I think the trait I most admired in Viola was her ability to make deep personal friendships almost instantly with a wide variety of people. One of her first friends that I met was D.R. Wagner. He pulled me aside and said, Peter, I need to give you there's something I want to warn you about with Viola. And I got a little nervous. He said, if you're going to continue this relationship, you're going to have to accept a huge number of new friends coming into your life. And how true he was, how true that was. Viola made friends everywhere she went. She had friends in high places, low places, and out of places. All that was required was an open heart, and the time it took, all it took was an open heart, and the time it took was instant. I remember going to the car from the grocery store, and by the time we got the car with groceries, the baggage boy had already told her his entire life story. That happened repeatedly. V, we gotta get going here. Security guards, CEOs, it didn't matter to V. Everybody was equal. When Viola worked at KVIE, the President Gordon Sauter would sometimes come to her desk and his resounding voice say, "Voila, let's go to lunch. Somewhere where I can smoke a cigar, please." Bob Martinez was the first Latino sheriff of Yolo County, and he often invited Viola to ride along with him in his patrol car so they could tell stories riding around Yolo County. Former poet laureate of Sacramento, Jose Montoya, often asked V to pick him up and just to drive him around the neighborhood where he was very well known. He liked people to see him cruising around town with a red head and a convertible car. People were quick to trust me too. Once we were on a river cruise, and the two ladies next to our cabin introduced themselves as sisters who often traveled together. And I was shocked, and as were they, when after dinner she said, "And how did you two meet?" They looked surprised but said, "Well, this is the first time we've ever admitted in public that yes, we are a lesbian couple." And they later flew from New York to come visit us in California. Part of Eve's magic was her ability to uplift people. I remember an open mic poetry reading at the California Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco, where V was invited to serve as host. The employees were surprised when a young black janitor, who rarely interacted with anybody, came up and read a poem that he wrote. Afterwards, I'm looking for Viola, and I see her in the corner talking to that young gentleman. She told him his poem was powerful. She told him that he must keep writing. She said the world needs to hear from you. In conclusion, I only want to briefly address Viola's long struggles with two rare forms of cancer, malignant cancers. Much of the past 11 years is documented in blog and Facebook posts. It's still available should any of you want to look at those. Several years ago, Viola wrote a draft for a cancer memoir. It had a very surprising, perhaps ridiculous sounding title. The cancer memoir stated, "Ode to Joy." She wrote, "Where there is life, there is joy." Viola wasn't a fan of being called a warrior or someone who battled cancer. She lived with it and did her best to squeeze as much joy out of life as possible. Yes, I believe that helped her beat the odds, that all the doctors said she wouldn't live long. It was that desire to keep living more than fighting or being angry or mad at something. A good sense of humor also helped. One day, meeting with a palliative care doctor, she told me she was seeing white spots moving in front of her eyes. And to try and alleviate her anxiety, I said, "Well, maybe you're seeing the energy from all the people that are sending you prayers." She said, "Well, maybe that's it, but it might just be dandruff." I almost fell out of my chair in the hospital. Another time, a group of doctors were having a long discussion over the plans to remove her cancerous kidney, and she interrupted them at one point and said, "You know, I could die from all the seriousness in this room." The doctors chuckled and walked out of the room to continue their conversation. After V passed, an oncologist from UCSF called me one evening. This was the woman who saved Viola from an amputation of her left leg by placing an invention, her own invention, an artificial femur into her left leg. That allowed Viola to walk again and climb that mountain in Edinburgh, Scotland. She first celebrated climbing that mountain at age 40 and then did it again with a walker up a mountain trail at age 70. The doctor told me it had been a real honor to treat Viola, who was the most remarkable patient she'd ever seen in her years of practicing oncology. Dr. Wistrak went on to say that in spite of these numerous surgeries and almost unbearable pain, Vi always greeted her with a joyful smile, and she always asked, "How are you doing, and how are your children doing?" Vi asked me, after she passed, "Would you please give a piece of my jewelry to Dr. Wistrak as an appreciation?" And I asked the doctor, "Is it okay if I mail you a piece of jewelry?" She responded, "Peter, I will treasure it for as long as I live." We here now get to treasure Viola for the time we have left. If she could be here to say a few last words, it would be, make friends, love each other, find your joy, and don't be afraid of being ridiculous. We will now hear from a band that finds joy in being ridiculous sometimes. Draw Pinky.
I want to offer, not only for myself, but the entire Draw Pinky and probably everyone here, our heartfelt condolences and our love to you and your extended family. I think all of us could fill up, days, weeks, years of stories of Viola, and I look forward to sharing those afterwards. Right now, when words fail us, which is kind of ironic when we're speaking of a poet, we can reach for song to elevate us. And Viola would be the first to say that she was not an excellent singer, but she did love music, all types of music. She loved her personal guitar player as well. And she's just this person with this choice of vocabulary. And we are so lucky as a band, William Fuller, her lifetime writer, friend, and mischief maker, worked with her to create a catalog of songs that have become a core part of our Draw Pinky identity. And we performed these years ago at the Hemovitz Gallery as Viola's Pinky. And I hope they bring you joy today and soothe your heart. I will always think of her as the big-boned redhead, chasing hummingbirds with her apron. And now, Viola's Pinky.
Streets of Paris in sultry June, walking among cafes at night. A sea of black sweaters and night-bane shoes just before the goodbye. Writing songs at midnight on the Point Neuf, with a thick cigarette between my fingers, a gossamer ribbon in your cinnamon hair. The memory, it lingers. Lights were blinking on the quay beside the sand, singing below. A little crystal mirror for dancing drunken sailors, the riffs of saxophones. They were singing from the metro in the earth. The gentle breeze and fluttering scarf flowed like xylophone butter from my throat to my shoulders. A silk flag just above my heart. I wandered on, inhaling the musk of beautiful whores in their doorways, watching the men in the heat of the hunt, sniffing up hemlines and hallways. They were drooling from the corners of absinthe-crusted cracks, night laughter booming but shallow. handfuls of fingers on hearts made of glass, necks yearning for lips on the gallows. Then silence and stones, and rugs and bones, and the right moon in the sky. A deserted bench by a groaning barge, just before the goodbye.
Drowsy eyes rising over your shoulders like flashing little moons, brilliant illuminations in high-walled rooms. Well, come here, come close, won't you please touch my face? Let the fire and the air overtake this dingy place. Oh, I'm caught. Oh, I'm caught. In the shadow, and I'm hungry as a snake. You've melted my defenses, and passion is my fate. Well, I'm caught in the shadow, where sunshine claws and rips. Sure, it's so hard to find, and I'm in a total shadow. Caught in the shadow. The dream keeps coming. I can't say why, but through a torpid mambo, I can see your drowsy eyes.
Remember me like a machete. Remember remember the sound I made. Remember how I came at you, how your ears were whistling in the heart of the day. Remember how sweet the heavy scent of high dry grass under steel. How we tore through the shadows, how we tore through the night. The blade of sudden tongues was so real. Remember me like a fast hit, fire from an old song pit. It's a burning moon, cool tunes out, the hard low inside grip. Remember me like a machete. Remember the stroke of my spear. Remember how we rode through space and the chunk of the wires and the fingers and tears. Remember how your back cracked as you twisted underneath our fall. Remember all the power in our hands and the knives drawn along the wall. Remember me like a fast hit, fire from an old song pit. It's a burning moon, cool tunes out, the hard low inside grip. Remember the windows gleaming. Remember the light streaming. Remember how I made your head ring. Remember how I made your soul sing. Remember me like a machete. Remember me like a machete. Remember me like a machete. Remember me like a machete.
We remember it all, Viola.
Thank you, Draw Pinky. Viola and I partly met through Draw Pinky because Bill Fuller, the singer's wife, worked with my second wife in Los Angeles. Came up here to Sacramento, and at a Draw Pinky concert, she gave me Viola's phone number. So it's a small world sometimes. We have time for some shared memories, and several people have told me they have some comments they wanted to share, prepared a few words for us. The first is going to be Lindy Haber. Lindy?
Hi everyone, it's really good to see so many familiar faces, and some of you I haven't seen in 50 years, about 50 years, so what a pleasure this is to come here together and honor Viola. I wrote so many drafts of this and rewrote this so many times that in my haste this morning to rewrite it yet once again, with little time left, I left a few things out, and Gordy's going to remind me at some point.
Here's the microphone.
Huh?
Microphone.
Oh, microphone. Oh, hello. Microphone. Okay, is that good?
Yes.
Okay. Woman Waves began in the afternoon on a sidewalk in Midtown, Sacramento in 1973. Unbeknown to us, Viola and I were walking towards each other at the same time on said sidewalk. Once I was close enough to recognize her, I was delighted at this unexpected encounter, as she was a woman whom I admired immeasurably. At that time, Viola was emerging as a poet of note. We were acquainted because Ingrid Swanberg and I had published a few of her poems in volumes 1 and 2 of Nevermind. I also knew she was a passionate feminist who had helped found the Women's Studies program at Sacramento State College. After our initial greeting, she immediately put forth this question: would you be interested in creating and producing a feminist radio program with me for KZAP? Well, that was one of those who me moments to which I thankfully said yes. And that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship that withstood the test of time. We immediately set up meetings at her house in Midtown to discuss and plot content and format. We decided we would interview our subjects separately from one another, which we recorded on cassettes. Then we would meet at KZAP once a week to record the program to fit into a 15-minute time slot. The program title, Woman Waves, was Viola's idea. She also pitched the idea of including men in the intro. I don't know if you remember, but it was, hello, this is Viola, and this is Melinda, and this is Woman Waves, a feminist program for women and men. She believed if we included men and they listened to the show, they might learn a thing or two. One week, V's interview was played, the next week, mine. We laughed abundantly, usually thanks to Viola's wicked sense of humor and her inimitable wit, which I really think she could have sliced a tomato with. I really do. Women from all walks of life were featured. Governor Jerry Brown's press secretary, Elizabeth Coleman, the indomitable Lele Case, a talented musician who grew up in extreme poverty in Cleveland, Ohio, or luminaries such as Phoebe Snow and Dolly Parton. She had a knack for really, snaggling the most famous people. Bottom line, the backbone of Woman Waves was V's intelligence, organizational and writing skills, steady pace, and calm demeanor. And now I'm going to add what I wanted to say about KZAP, and that was we were so fortunate to become a part of the cast of characters at KZAP. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Gordy, and thank you so much anyone else who's here who worked at KZAP. You had created an atmosphere of acceptance, irrepressible fun, and freedom of expression, which was absolutely a gift. So thank you. Bottom line, the backbone of Woman Waves was V's intelligence. Oh, I said that already, didn't I? But I'll say it again. Anyway, fast forward to the KZAP reunion of 2018. Although Viola and I had previously reconnected on Facebook, we had not seen each other for quite a while. So when she arrived, I followed her around like a puppy. Apparently she wasn't too annoyed by that as we sat together reminiscing about old and new times. The spark was still there. And so began a new chapter of our friendship. True to her nature, Viola welcomed me back into her fold, kindly and lovingly, for which I will forever be grateful. In retrospect, I think of her as an inspirationist, someone who has a positive impact on others, encouraging them to achieve, grow, or to simply feel better. This was how she showed her love, which she sprinkled around the world at large. In my view, her capacity to love, regardless of her circumstances, was of the highest order. We all know her will to live and love of life was epic, which is why, with Peter's permission, I chose to read this poem from A Feast of the Will. This is gonna be hard. Well, maybe not. Love never ends. Even when the stern command is thrown like a boulder, down a ravine, past history, beyond death, into the dreams of all its many luminous pools, into rabbit warrens and dark streets, into black holes with the stars cut out, into unfathomable lakes that gleam at unbelieving eyes and thick hide. Love lives without borders or flags. What begins in one dimension flows on to uncharted seas, loops back on itself, enfolds existence, neither here nor there. It is all-inclusive. If you lose it, you will find it, even when you don't want it to find you. It is circular breath and pounding blood. It is stronger than flesh and warmer than the fires that first burned here. It is the gift and curse of the universe, the joke and sincerity of sonnets, the unexpected guest who returns to Elijah's empty place. It is the meat we dream of and the potatoes we need. It is the Paris and the spring and Pompeii in the fall. Love comes sneaking up, unstoppable weed, in the chapel of impossible growth. Is luck and chance and change overdue? It is an idea, a friend, the quick beginning, the long middle. Love never ends.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to hear from Cynthia Linville. Cynthia?
Is this one still on? I'm Cynthia Linville, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a Sacramento poet and I teach at Sac State. Peter has asked me to read one of these poems, but before I do, I'm going to very briefly say a few words about V. I first met V in the mid-'80s when I was a teenager and a student of Dennis Schmidt, and Dennis invited V to come and do a reading for his students. I still remember a line from one of these poems at that reading. In the morning, he opens me like a ripe fruit. And I thought, you can say that out loud in public? At that time, I didn't know many older, sexy women. Now, no, older. V wasn't even 40. She was in her mid-30s. But to me, that was a revelation. I didn't become friends with V until I was in my 40s. I was back in Sacramento hosting poetry readings, and I asked V to come and read at one of the readings I was hosting, and she did. And I reminded her of that first experience, and of course she was delighted, and invited me to come back and have lunch with her at her and Peter's lovely home in Sonoma. We had lunch out in the garden, and she gave me a tour of her yurt. After that, V became more than just a friend to me. She was a mentor for poetry, for photography, and for life. And one thing about V, there was no conversational gauntlet she couldn't instantly pick up and throw right back at me. Whether that was performing with musicians, getting published, or indulging in interesting sex. V was never shy. She made a habit of living her life to the fullest, and that experience gave her unique perspectives that she was always very generous in sharing. And even now, I still feel V's presence very strongly. Sometimes I can hear her laughter or hear her snarky comments, like about Gavin Newsom's hair. And most of all, I still remember her stories, as do we all. The poem I'm reading today is Monet's Kitchen.
Oh, yeah.
And Peter tells me that V actually wrote this poem in Monet's kitchen, and that she just managed to finish the first draft before the staff made her leave. Monet's kitchen. Come down here, Monet. Come down here now, my little cabbage. It is morning, and light is splashing on sparkling tiles. The copper pans are shimmering solar jewels. Come down here, Monet, my strong-eyed darling. I will stream your chocolate and spread the bread with clouds of butter and honey. Come down here, Monet. Come down here right now, my sweet billy goat. I will splay my legs across the cook's blue table. Come down here, Monet, before the servants take their station, beating bread dough on floured boards. Come down here, Monet, my hungry child, and bathe with me in the violet blaze of geranium and iris. Come Come down here, Monet. Come down here now. The room is trembling with steaming pots on a cantankerous wood stove. Come down here, Monet, my darling farmer, while spring flings itself through open windows and the checkered curtains wave. Come down here, Monet, come down here immediately and see the small bird flying against the blue plane of the high, clean ceiling. Come down here, Monet, if you value your reputation as an artist. Come down here and bring your taste for redheads and roses, for blue and yellow hues. Come down here, Monet. I am crushing the peppermint for your first cup of tea and chasing hummingbirds with the skirts of my apron. Come down here, Monet, my little slice of ginger. I'm arranging flowers for the grotto above the deep wooden sink. Come down here, Monet, in your blue silk robe. Come down hungry and thirsty. Let your eyes weep in the light. Let the sun fall on your face. Come down here, Monet. I am boiling your eggs and cutting your peaches with pearl-handled knives that flash with my wrist. Come down here, Monet, my big buck in the garden. Come down and do it quickly. Come down here, Monet, with your paints and that urgent palette. Come down here, Monet. I am half naked and barefoot in the hot heart of your house. Come down here, Monet. The pomade of the new day is thick in both of my hands. Come down here, Monet, before the light changes and the flowers fade. Come down here, Monet, before the season turns and the milkman arrives. Come down here, Monet. The water lilies are full and my hair is tangled. Come down here, Monet. Let the lilacs precede you. Let the pomegranates deceive you. Come down here, Monet, and bring blue silk ribbons for the big, healthy girl in the kitchen. Come down here, Monet. Ride hard and ride fast, and don't spare the horses. Come down here, Monet. My heart is beating like a drum with a skin made of hours. Come down here, Monet, but to die full of light in a chamber of flowers.
That was wonderful, Cynthia. Next is another friend that DR warned me about who came into my life thanks to Viola, and that's Ann Kelly. Ann?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ann Kelly, and I'm from San Francisco, not Sacramento. I first met Dee in the mid-'80s when she moved to San Francisco and took a job at the Institute for Food and Development Policy, or Food First, as it was known. This was founded by Francis Moore-Lafay, or Frankie, who I'm sure you know wrote Diet for a Small Planet. So that's the environment we were in. And it was co-founded with Joe Collins, who definitely knew a good pathway to his own fame and recognition when he saw it. So they were joined together. I'll tell you just two strong memories of Dee during those years in San Francisco that I think reflect, well, her sense of flair and a bit of unexpected drama. It was October 17, 1989. Dee was scheduled for a reading and reception at the iconic City Light bookstore. Then at 5:04, as people gathered, the Loma Prieta earthquake violently shook the city and beyond. A section of the Bay Bridge collapsed, as did a freeway in Oakland, the Marina District erupted in fire. Countless buildings were destroyed or damaged, and the city went totally dark. Well, except for City Lights Bookstore. And that section of North Beach. So, with the lights on and no major damage there, the reception and readings continued. And it included participation supported by patrons of a few iconic watering holes within steps of the bookstore. Some of you may know some of them. Could only happen to V, or the city's falling apart and she's having a reading. The second story is how V and I, along with a few others at work, with Frankie and Joe, became very disenchanted with how they were running things, mainly Joe. So, egged on by V, we staged a protest, or maybe a small uprising in this left-leaning organization. And then, we were all fired. It wasn't successful. V and I continued to remain close friends after she moved back to Sacramento, but especially when she returned to the Bay Area with her husband Peter. During the following decades, we enjoyed countless reunions. But then, after V's personal 9/11 tragedy in 2013, her frequent visits to San Francisco were mainly to UC medical centers. In the early years of her brave battles, she shared much of her plight on her blog. But in 2019, 6 years into her path of recovery, she decided she wanted to write a memoir about her journey and asked me if I would be her editor. What a great honor that was. What I witnessed was how this chapter-by-chapter narrative forced a new kind of discipline on her writing. It was chronological with countless details of one medical episode after another, because there were many, many episodes. But it was always done very colorfully, of course. There is Drama Doc, Dr. Distinguished, Opera Doc, Dr. Chatter, and Dr. Genius Woman. Her vivid descriptions of pain and suffering, seriously, vivid descriptions, chapter after chapter, forced me to tell her, enough with the vomiting already. Interspersed in the memoir are vivid descriptions of roommates and staff, haunting recollections of several states of hallucination, and of course some poetry. But most noticeable was the switch to reflections on life and the importance of love in the latter chapters. She decided to name the book, as Peter had mentioned, Ode to Joy. Where there is life, there is joy. So the latter part of the book took on this different approach, no more vomiting, but all very positive things about lessons she's learned, and look at love and kindness and what mattered in life. It was a dramatic switch. But a key question was, just how did she want to end the book? That's a question all books face, like how do you end it, but especially a memoir. So what's the last thing you want to say? One of her proudest moments in life was climbing Arthur's Seat, the main peak in the hills surrounding Edinburgh, Scotland. That was on her 40th birthday. She has always wanted to return and scale it again. So for her 70th birthday, she got her wish. Proudly and with steel determination, she ascended the peak, pushing shebang, her rugged walking frame, with Peter at her side. This is the poem she wrote at the end of the final chapter. This is how she ended the book. author suit the easy way. I will read just the end of it. I see it's in your program. So I won't read the whole thing, but I'll read the last 3 stanzas here just to see how she wrapped up the book. For mine was the battle of the life of over-surrender, sorry. Mine was the fight of the century. It was not going home in limp failure. Mine was to crawl to the top, to crow from the peak, taking it. There were those moments along the grassy side when I panted how hard it was, how I just didn't know if I could go on, all the while shooting to the top, coming down blind with joy. The wet determination, the shoulders pushing, the face contorted, the absolutely grave fight inspiring those who followed. Strangers, friends, who stood aside to say, "Bra, victory, brave lassie, bra."
Thank you, Anne. It was nice to hear. And we're working on possibly getting that memoir out. It's a rough draft that Vee left us with. Next up is someone who also met Vee when she was a teenager, Kathleen Miner.
Thank you. Viola was my very good friend for 55 years. We met in 1970. I moved into an upstairs flat and she lived downstairs. And we became friends in an era of free love, feminism, and in our case, motherhood. My daughter Kristen was 3, and her daughters Suzanne and Zoe were 2 and 1. I have so many memories of her because of so many years of knowing her, but I just want to highlight a few. In 1977, when my son Aaron was born, she officially became Auntie V, and she was very pleased to be his special aunt. In the late 70s, she organized a bra burning party and convinced me to have it in my backyard. We had, I think there were maybe 70 or 80 people, lots of bras, and lots of fire. In the 1980s, she visited me in Houston, one of the very few friends that I had that came all that way to see me when I lived there. And she brought sourdough bread and California wine to try to lure me back. And it worked. In the mid-90s, she calmly gave Aaron driving lessons in the foothills while I sat in the back seat, terrified. She was very good at remaining calm. In the late 90s, when she and Peter got married, she asked me, well, they got married twice, once in Giverny and once in Kenwood. And she asked me to be her matron of honor in the Kenwood wedding. And I was so pleased that she did. In the early aughts, she would sometimes pick me up in her convertible on a Sunday morning, and we would go to the farmer's market, and then we would cruise through the old city cemetery. Other people have mentioned her drama. She was always dramatic. In the early aughts, let's see, where am I? In 2005, I helped her and Peter build a yurt in their backyard, and that became her studio. In 2011, she and Peter offered to let us host Aaron and Harvest's wedding rehearsal dinner in the backyard, and that was a fantastic party. We had to go 2 weeks early and paint the back porch and clean up the backyard by the fig trees. Just last year, she and Peter visited our house in Auburn and spent a couple days, and it was a wonderful visit. It was one of several adventures that they had last year while she was feeling really well. We shared more dinners and feasts than I can count. 4th of July and Thanksgiving and birthdays and anniversaries, and sometimes just because we like to eat. We exchanged Christmas ornaments every year. She loved any ornament that had the Eiffel Tower on it. So I found many ornaments with Eiffel Towers. I gave her Eiffel Tower wine glasses, Eiffel Tower plates, and an Eiffel Tower puzzle. We celebrated each other's weddings, and we cried together over the loss of family and friends. She was my dear friend, my mentor, my empath, my compatriot, my kids' Auntie V, my gauge on what it means to be brave. When you talked with her, she really listened. She was all in. She was so honest. If she liked something, she told you. And if she didn't like something, she told you. There are many descriptors when someone dies. Ascension, crossing, reincarnation, transitioning, passing away, perishing, and leaving the planet. No matter where she is or what she might be doing, she remains very much alive in my head and my heart. I remember her distinctive voice, that playful smile, her huge intelligence, and those great Pacific blue eyes. I feel lucky and very thankful that the fates brought us together so many years ago. I love you, my dear friend, Viola.
Kathleen, another member here, is an author and writer that many of you probably know, and a poet as well. And Viola and Mary Mackey have read together in San Francisco, Sacramento, and beyond. Mary?
Hi everybody, this is a sad occasion, but sort of happy in a way to see all of Viola's friends gathered here together. I'm going to still tell you a few informal stories that I think typify. I met Viola in 1972. When I was 27 years old, I had my first teaching job at Sac State. I had just been hired by Women's Studies, which was probably 1 or 2 years old at that point. Half-time in Women's Studies, half-time in English. And I was intimidated by the idea of how was I going to look like a professor. I mean, actually the first class I taught, I felt like saying to the students, don't take notes, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I came and I met, and Viola was one of the people who hired me. Viola and Sally Wagner. And so I came to meet these people, and I was, I thought, here I'm meeting the people who hired me, what am I doing? I don't know anybody. And what they did was, she and Sally and a couple of other women surrounded me and sang, Mary Mac, 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 dressed in black, 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 silver, silver buttons down her back, 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 which is a jumper, which really put me at ease. And I partly talked to Viola at one point, and I said, Women's Studies was completely new. She said, don't worry, we'll make it up as we go along, which is what we did. Viola lived on K Street, in a collective on K Street with Sally Wagner and some other people. She was firmly opposed to the war in Vietnam. She was always for, peace and reconciliation. And, I visited her often there. And it was, K Street was a pretty interesting and fairly wild place at the time. There's a lot of work with Vietnam veterans against the war. She had a very strong social conscience and a sense of equality, which is what helped her talk to so many people. Later, actually many years later, she moved to the Bay Area
And I've always, for 50 years, by the way, I've been driving Route 80 back and forth to Sacramento. I feel part of both places. She lived in a little house behind my house. She was technically my tenant, but she was really my buddy. And, we raised a pair of calico cats together. I had a calico, they were twin cats. But one night, she'd had an unhappy relationship. I wasn't feeling so great myself. And she said, I just don't know what to do. I said, she might have said, we'll make up a ritual, because we were making it up as we go along. So, okay. So we took the picture of the unpleasant person in question, and we put him in a blender, and we blended him. We didn't drink it, fortunately. And then we took some sage, we almost set the house on fire. And we just, we didn't believe we were really doing anything, but it felt good, She said, well, that's over. And I said, yeah, good thing, And then the last thing I want to tell you is one of Viola's wonderful stories about when she went to Kazakhstan as part of a peace group to inspect nuclear power plants there. She told me she was in the hotel, and of course she talked to the bellboy who brought in her suitcase. And he said to her in Kazakhstan, he said, the Soviet Union was going at that point. It had not fallen yet. And he said to her, I have a friend in America, maybe you know her. And she said, well, I don't think so. And he said, well, you might know her. She's really a dear friend of mine. I care about her a lot. And when I get enough money, I'm going to go over to America, and I'm going to take really good care of her. And she said, well, what's your friend's name? And he said, Janis Joplin. And she said, I have some very bad news for you. And that was Viola to a T. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. I'd actually forgotten about the Janis Joplin story. Next up, I'm going to ask Andrew DeFay. Viola and Andrew became friends after he became poet laureate, and first immediately called him up to introduce herself to Andrew, and they became very close friends. So Andrew, I'd like to hear a few words from you. Thank you.
She was the first poet laureate, I'm the last. When Peter asked if I would come and speak, we started talking about joy, right? We've heard it a couple of times tonight. And I've been doing a lot of work in the neuroscience field on joy recently. So, in her death, I went looking in her poetry for joy. And I went into this book that we already heard from tonight, right? Some of you are familiar with that book. And I found joy. It says, love's penny was being spent foolishly, lavishly, brilliantly. I went for it, and in my white-headed joy reached out in a poem called The Conjured Kiss. What I also noticed was that I found grief and hope, not to mention Buddha's hands and even an invisible orchestra. I think that my grandmother knew that joy wasn't a feeling, but a skill that needs to be trained in moments rather than chased for lifetimes. When we talked, it was always joy fully. Not without suffering or struggle, but about the joy inside even those sufferings and struggles. See, my biological grandmothers had both been gone for over a decade when Viola reached out. We talked about being laureates and traded poems, and one day she said she had a dream where I called her grandmother poetry. And I've always been someone who listened to their dreams. So from that day on, she was grandmother poetry. At first, I thought it was cute that she was in a group called Tough Old Broads. But the more I got to know her, the more I realized how fitting it was. And I would say in all of my research around joy, it was probably her joy that made her so tough. Resilient is the word that the scientists use. Through cancer or through assassination threats, that was my grandmother poetry. And I'm gonna miss her dearly. If she was here right now, I would thank her for her kindness of spirit, her generosity of energy, an example of warrior poetship. I would tell her that I love her very much and that I will always say her name. As I tell the young poets, poets live forever, and so do the ones they love. And it's interesting that we already heard the poem I'm about to reference tonight. Because when I was looking, I also found in her poetry that love never ends. Thanks, y'all.
I'd like to also just call Patrick Rizal, who is largely responsible for us all being here in this room and helped me a lot of effort to pull off this event. Patrick, you said you wanted to say a few words, I guess?
Yeah, just a couple.
We can have more than two.
For 24-25, the Poetry Center has had as a focus for its celebration of 45 years in existence, expressing gratitude for those folks who came before us, who helped pave the way, joined in as board members, volunteers, advisors, or who otherwise offered valuable support and guidance, and have left this plane for whatever it is that lies beyond that. Some of those people are still with us and have been all along. Mary Mackey is one of those people. As part of our plans for April, there will be a memorial reading, which was already planned, in which we pay tribute to many of those people by having those of us still here read their work. I hope Viola would be part of the latter group, but it will be our honor to include her in the celebrated chorus of those who we owe a debt to, and we do owe Viola a debt. And so I want to read this sort of short poem, which is funny, a little tongue-in-cheek, a little making fun of a stereotype, and also explaining why it exists. And it's called All the Young Poets. All the young poets have red cheeks and sit by the stove in clean new berets, filling the cafe with elaborate juvenile angle studies, hunched like tough cabbages over the cold coils of a swap meat hot plate. They are little artists. They doodle in journals about first disappointments and other tedium of the God-sighted and the tortured, nursing quarter mugs of tepid black coffee, loudly misquoting French 19th century philosophers. How dear they are, all the young poets, laboriously turning angels on a spit, counting the ones that fall, long fingers balancing a nickel on its rim, just about to die of cool. For hours, they brood at the table, gaping at the waitress in red lips and black pants, a freckled-faced brunette who steams mean latte and pouts angrily, giving no visible indication of the apparent existence of all the young poets. At the stroke of 11, a heavy girl in gray comes to clear their empty cups. One of them gets courageous and reads a poem. The girl winces and shrugs. It's just too bad. Forlorn, the boys fold up like blistered lawn chairs and walk home.
Thank you, Patrick. I always enjoy her humorous poems, too. Robert, you had something you want to say? Okay, yeah, we have just time for one. Huh? Okay. We have one final concluding remark, but if you want to say something, you're welcome to. As their former boss at KZAP. Nobody bossed you. The man who attempted to be her boss at KZAP.
Aloha. Just the other day, I was walking with my spouse, Scott Forrington, and we were talking about the And he happened to say she was a force of nature. And that label can be applied to a whole lot of people, but it can't not be said that Viola was a force of nature. There's a lot that I learned from Viola, as is the case with everybody here. It started when she joined KZAP in those early days, and that's when we became friends. There was that program on KZAP called Woman Waves that Lindy put together with Viola, and it was of its time and ahead of its time. And it was a teaching moment for anybody who heard it. I learned a thing or two. But what I want to share with Viola was a private, small event. It has everything to do with my wedding to Scott. On that day, Peter married us. Peter performed the ceremony that made it legal, and at that time, being legal meant everything, and it still does. After the I do's, Viola stood and recited a poem. And if I'm not mistaken, and Scott agrees, it's the poem you read, Lindy. I hadn't heard that in that many years. She stood there, emanating dignity and purpose and strength, reading. So, as that was happening, I was imagining the Sacramento Poet Laureate in our little backyard in Shingle Springs, reciting a poem honoring our marriage. For that and many things, Viola and Peter will always be a part of our family. It can't not be said that Viola Weinberg Spencer was a powerful force of nature. Mahalo.
Thank you, Robert, coming all the way from Hawaii, where I wouldn't mind going back with them. We have one final person who's going to speak, Steve Holsapple. I sent him a piece of writing. It's one of the last things Viola wrote. And he read it and said, "Peter, this has to be delivered to people." I said, "Steve, I can't do it." It's too emotional, but he will.
We'll see about that. You know, I read through this a number of times and I thought, okay, I can do this. So we are going to find out. And first, I just want everyone here just to take a moment to think about Peter Spencer and what he brought for all these years today. Okay, let's see how this goes. And Viola wrote this, I'm guessing, just weeks before she passed. So I'm trying to stay woke to the cancer and what it does to me. It is shocking, and yet one comes to expect it. It is a constant. It is as sure as the crabgrass that upheaves the garden. I pray a lot now, and my friends are amazed. I remember talking to my mother about it as she lay dying. "It can't hurt," she would say with a dry tongue and popping mouth, and you just never know. I find it a meditation that turns bitterness to joy. I think of my barrage of friends, so constant, so loving, with their eternal flags of love. You are used to my calls for support. You answer my cries. I am not alone in the dark, and I am not unbeatable either. I am overcome by emotion, but not ruined by the cancer. Thank you. Thank you, and thank God, whatever form I think God takes. There is a spirit world evidenced in my travels, a wind that swept across volcanoes and high deserts and mizzled highlands and raging seas. When the time comes, I will go with death. I will slip through the earthly arms that hold me here and simply become an element you might remember. I hope you do. And we do. And we will always.